people should be doing right now to ensure that they are seeing the right kind of ideas enter society, or promote the right kind of ideas in some effective way?
I think they should be looking at what they themselves can do to change their microenvironment. And they should not be holding their breath waiting for the centralized decision makers to come save them, because they're not coming. What we've seen from government action on this is nothing but destruction. We've got the CDC screwing things up, then the FDA screws it up further, then they have CLIA regulations, certificate of need laws. All of these things are just impeding people's freedom, making it really difficult for people to do their jobs. Likewise, the response to this is print shitloads of money and give it out to their friends. I don't know if people have figured this out, but when they print the money, they're diluting yours. So they're paying you to stay in your house with your own money, and you're not even getting a large portion of it. All right. The $6 trillion, if you average that across 328 million people, it's something, and you only get $1,200 of it. Well, you should be getting 18,000 of it, and you're not. This is a game where they are basically robbing the coffers of the Treasury right now, because they can get away with it. Everyone's panicking. So they're not your solution. The solution rests within you, and you need to go and find where you can deploy yourself in this new market. And I would stop following the rules, because they're not following them. I would resort to augurism here. I would resort to basically free market economics. And if you think it's a black market, don't worry about it, because frankly, everything's illegal right now, and none of it justifiably is. And so only you can really get yourself out of this. And I wouldn't hold your breath for sacred regulation to come down and turn the economy on in 3 months and give you a check. It ain't coming.
How bad do you think breadlines and things will get?
I have a hard time predicting politicians. I mean, I've been watching the spread of the virus very closely, and I don't think it's as dire as what they're doing. So why are they doing it? Right? There's lots of smart people that can see that this isn't going to be much more dramatic than the flu. We've never acted this way for any other flu before. So what's the motive? And then if you look before the virus came, the economy wasn't necessarily in great shape then either. This is really just the pin that pricked the bubble, right? We had inverted yield curves. We'd been printing money for a very long time. Everyone was expecting there to be an economic disruption of some sort. No one just knew what the trigger was going to be. So are they trying to extend this as long as possible so that we are willing to accept any new order that comes next? Right? I mean, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me that they would bite off cut off their nose to spite their face here. The economy's certainly been shaken up quite a bit, but
and that doesn't express to you, man, they must have thought this was bad, because when the people that have money give up money, for example, if all of the money that's going to go away from March Madness is going to go away, like those guys, they did that because something scared them.
Well, what's kind of interesting about that is a lot of those companies did that before the government stepped in, right? Like they voluntarily decided that they looked at the data saying this could be really messy. We don't know what's coming. The models look scary. But I don't think it was a government order that shut down a lot of the companies voluntarily chose to let's push this off. Let's cancel this conference, South by Southwest, right? And that should be a reminder to people that people are doing that because they have self-interest in mind. They don't want to be the super spreader event, and that could get them liability, and that could be a disaster for their reputation. So the market in many ways is reacting before the government is, and the government's just stepping in front of the parade, taking credit. So that's an important thing, I think, to remember, that markets are underlying this. They are doing some things correctly in spite of this, and they're all doing it on their own timelines. And that might be the more optimal approach than having one person step in and do it all. But in terms of the government has an echo chamber of advice, right? The people advising the government on this. Let's take. I know Fauci. I know Francis Collins. I've worked with both of them. All right, they're good people. People want to villainize them, but they're in an environment where their paychecks aren't going to stop. They haven't. I mean, Fauci's had a paycheck for 40 years from the government, right? So he's never personally at risk for making these calls. He's very likely to gain a tremendous amount of funding after this. And his funding is likely to be larger the longer this held. The more pain we feel, the more we're going to enhance the NIH budget, right? His patent estate, primarily vaccine-based intellectual property, all right? Is that the only voice that should be advising the president right now? He's no skin in the game. He's going to get a bigger budget when this is all over, and the budget's going to be larger the more pain we experience. His vaccine patent estate is not on coronaviruses, but he's mostly got intellectual property surrounding vaccines. We're hearing a narrative. Everyone hold your breath until the vaccines are here. That's crazy. The coronavirus vaccines we've had in the past have backfired. They make things worse, right? They've tried these in other organisms, and there was an effect where when you got the vaccine, when you eventually were given the actual virus, your immune system went on fire and you got a cytokine storm, and the vaccines actually had a worse outcome for the animals than just getting the disease itself. That's the history of coronavirus vaccines. It's really ugly. And so to suggest that we're going to race one of those things out, and by the way, I'm sure you're familiar, the vaccine industry is one of the dirtiest industries in the bit, and they have no liability, right? So you're going to mandate this, you're going to have a chip to go across borders, and there's no liability for the people making these things. That's a recipe for absolute disaster.
You've just jumped the shark, man. Now you're talking like you don't like vaccines?
No, I like vaccines. I just don't like people who don't have liability when they make them. There's a big difference. Okay. Immunology works, but you can't have a market where the people making a product can cut the corner in manufacturing because they're no longer held liable. They've socialized the cost of the damages of vaccines onto the vaccine courts and the VAERS system. That's nuts. I make products, and every day I got to keep track that my products don't have a contaminant in them. They don't have to do that.
Man, I don't know. Like, you are really in this area where if you talk about vaccines or anything about them, you are. Oh,
you're an anti-vaxxer. Yeah, you're an anti-vaxxer. Exactly. That's third rail material. But think of the framing of that stereotype, right? What's your position on antibiotics? Are you pro or anti-antibiotics? Have you ever been asked that?
No.
Right. I mean, you don't categorize. Like, doxycycline's pretty cool, but I don't know about the Z-Pak, right? Z-Pak's pretty cool right now for coronavirus. You don't talk about classes of drugs like this. Why are we talking about vaccines like this? Pro or anti? That's a false dichotomy. Some vaccines are good for certain people. I'll tell you, if I'm a family that's got epilepsy, I'm going to read every damn packet insert to figure out which one of those I should take because they all have different risk profiles. And epilepsy is one of those conditions that are genetically predisposed to having bad reactions to some vaccines.
So a couple of weeks ago, just some night, I was sitting around and I threw out a tweet that said, how long would a vaccine need to be tested before it was safe to be mandatory on society? This was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. People went nuts on me. They were like, why would you even ask this question? When it's ready, we'll give it to people. Like, wait a second. No. You decide beforehand what the testing parameters will be, and then you let people know. So that way everybody gets a chance to see, hey, that's what they said it would do. That's what it did. That's what we were worried about. These are the unintended consequences that we were able to monitor for. But people treated me as though I was an anti-vaxxer. I'm a Peace Corps volunteer, right? Like I am a normie.
You've seen them work
down. Yeah. 100%, man. 100%. Yeah. But if you come anywhere near talking about this, I saw the Cornell Alliance for Science equating anyone that was going to the protests against lockdowns as anti-vaxxers and like right-wing seditionists. And you're like, you are a public, university. And you're sitting there saying there is anyone that disagrees with this point of view at all should be completely labeled and written off and thrown out of the conversation.
Yeah, it is. It's a new priesthood. And we're not wearing black robes. We're wearing white ones now. The scientists are the ones who can read the code of life, and it will be told to you what it is from on high. There is a problem with us having this irrational irreverence on science. I'm a scientist. I have a certain domain expertise. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a doctor. I can do the genetics on these things. But, I think you should have economists at the table, right? This concept that, follow the science and only the scientists lead everything is dangerous. You need a lot of different expertise to think through what's going on here. And if you bring up any challenge to this, like I don't like the fact that the incentive structures on the pharmaceutical industry lead to really negative consequences. I really believe in immunology and vaccination. I just don't believe in the legislation you've put forward with these people. You're instantly labeled anti-science. You're an idiot. You got a tinfoil hat, and we're going to discredit you. Some of that is coming, I think, because of the manner in which we fund science. There's far too many scientists that I think are getting funded through government sources, and they should be in the private sector and working in careers that don't have those types of conflicts involved. Right? When you're working under that environment, you don't have market forces guiding the research that you should be doing. You're just getting stolen money from the government that effectively is oftentimes reinforcing their agenda. Right? They will fund things based on what look at NIAID. It's NIDA, NIDIA, National Institute for Drug Abuse. Okay, we have an institution whose goal is kind of evident in their title of their institution, National Institute for Drug Abuse, not drug benefits, drug abuse. So all they do is they look for science that shows drugs harm you. That's not science. That's propaganda. The whole institution is propaganda. Right? They're looking for the negative consequences of they shouldn't do that. There should be National Institute of Drug Research, right? Look for the pros and the cons. And this is the organization that has funded most of the research showing cannabis harms people. Yet we've got alcohol in the streets and an opiate epidemic, and cannabis is like benign compared to these things. There's an institute dedicated to tearing it down.
You may be the devil. You're the most persuasive person. like I am completely wrapped by your argument.